I want to do this film because I want people to know. My name is Patricia Crone, and I have terminal lung cancer. It's not a very good type of cancer to have. I got metastases in my brain, and they will grow and they will eventually kill me. So I am interested in anything over and above the normal treatment that can help. And this is where marijuana comes in. I wanted not to get high, but to get well. My cancer was diagnosed in November 2011. My first reaction was the kind of, I see, that's it. I was fully prepared for, death quite soon. Then you start treatment, and that, of course, completely ruins all your steely resolve. Now I must accept death, etc., etc. Once you start treatment, you can't go around saying I'm going to die because you are in treatment. Chemotherapy was terrible, undilutedly terrible. They cut out a third of my lung and a lot of lymph nodes. And after getting over the operation, I felt so well. That's enough, that's enough. It's impossible to feel that there's anything wrong with you. You get used to being alive in a new mode, which is a new mode that's called, the cancer mode. I am a professor of Islamic history at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. All my work has been about the rise and development of Islam. This book here, this is the first book I wrote. I wrote this with Michael Cook. We are good friends. I wrote this one with Martin Hines, and we lived together. Martin died of cancer at the age of 47. I may know a lot about ancient Islam, but I know next to nothing about the modern world of marijuana. I was a smoker once, but I have never smoked a reefer or eaten a pot-laced brownie, so I turned to the internet for help. Somebody suggested that I try a marijuana concentrate known as Rick Simpson's oil.
Most of the hemp oil I produce comes from indica strain. Place the starting material, preferably good bud, in a plastic container. Dampen the bud material in the container with the solvent you are using. Then crush the bud material. Drain the solvent from the starting material and put it through a coffee filter. An electric rice cooker boils the solvent off very effectively. Generally, a pound of good hemp will produce about 2 ounces of high-grade oil.
That's a lot of...
Ingesting this amount of oil over a 2 to 3 month period is enough to cure most serious cancers.
I'm a skeptic by profession, and I know there are a lot of fake cures out there, but that cannabis fights cancer is not just an old wives' tale. What do we have here? Cannabinoid, endocannabinoids are possible preventatives of common disease, including cancers. You have Aberdeen School of Medicine and Dentistry. It's very good to know that there is this potential. Oh, wait a minute, look here. National Cancer Institute. Possible effects of cannabinoids include anti-inflammatory activity, blocking cell growth, preventing the growth of blood vessel supply tumors. Laboratory and animal studies have shown that cannabinoids may be able to kill cancer cells while protecting normal cells. That's the potential that we all want to have developed. So I went to NYU to see a young doctor who wrote his dissertation on cannabis.
Okay, Patricia, my name is Sunil Agarwal. I'm a physician here at the New York University Medical Center. I'm a house staff officer in the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine.
Maybe you could tell us, what are cannabinoids?
And those are the active ingredients of cannabis that occur inside the human body and actually many living systems all the way down to sea squirts. But somehow insects and other groups didn't evolve these things, but they're also called cannabinoids, but they're called endocannabinoids. Mm-hmm. There's this entire massive cannabinoid receptor system in the brain.
What are cannabinoid receptors?
They're one of the most abundant proteins in the brain, And all major organs have cannabinoid receptors, and it turns out that they have physiological importance in mood, appetite, memory, inflammation, tumor regulation, bone growth, immunity, even reproduction. They're involved in cells communicating with each other at a basic level. So it's basically an ancient signaling system that we've just discovered in the last 20 years. That has been shown in preclinical, animal, and some early human studies to kill tumors by apoptosis, cell death, stopping the blood supply to tumors, and preventing metastatic spread, and sparing other surrounding tissues. There's no reason.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
But it's all factually documented in National Library of Medicine.
Now, I've got to get myself a pound of cannabis. Cannabis, aka marijuana, hemp, weed, tea, pot, etc., was once a commonly used American medicine, which somehow turned into a dangerous, illegal drug. 19 states and the District of Columbia allow marijuana for medical use, but federal law still prohibits it. And me, getting caught with a whole pound of pot? I'd be treated as a dealer. And that would mean dying in jail, or, if I'm lucky, deportation. I grew up in Denmark. My parents had 5 children. I finished school there and I went to university there for 2 years, and then I went to England. I had a job in Oxford and then in Cambridge. And then I went to America. The winter went by, and for all my determination, I still didn't have any cannabis because it's dangerous. And at the time, I thought it wasn't realistic. And I thought, I'm hopeless. I will never find this, and just forget it. My problems getting cannabis really started in April 1937, when Congress proposed a heavy tax to make it unobtainable. Cannabis-based medicines were already losing out to regulation and modern standardized drugs. But still, the tax was fiercely opposed by the American Medical Association. And that's really when the drug war started.
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling vulture who preys on the weakness of his fellow man.
To people who study the marijuana issue, Harry Anslinger is the bad guy.
Dr. John Getman teaches criminal justice at Shenandoah University in Virginia and is a former director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Harry Anslinger was the leader of the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, BNDD, for the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He was as much a fixture in federal law enforcement as J. Edgar Hoover was in the FBI. Now, Anslinger was behind the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, the federal prohibition that became federal marijuana law for the mid-century. Yeah, he was overzealous with marijuana, but there was ignorance at the time as to what the drug was, why it produced the reactions that it produced. From ignorance comes hysteria.
Marijuana, assassin of youth. An incredibly influential article that Harry Anslinger wrote about the horrors of marijuana. The sprawled body of a young girl lay crushed on the sidewalk the other day. Everyone called it suicide, but actually it was murder. The killer was a narcotic known to America as marijuana. The article inspired the famous exploitation movie. There was this idea that people would smoke hash, then they were transformed into homicidal maniacs. And marijuana was a recipe for insanity, he said.
Harry Anslinger thought it was a horrible, evil thing, and whatever they could do to convince people not to use it was fine with him.
Harry Anslinger's scare tactics worked. Marijuana, the menace, won out over marijuana, the medicine. Already by 1942, cannabis was out of the American pharmacopoeia. Cannabis had lost all connection to medicine and was now only a dangerous drug. Spring turned to summer. 2012 was half gone, and I still didn't have any cannabis. But I felt extremely well. Then in August, I had another scan, MRI. Every time I have one, I get more nervous about the result. It showed that I had more metastasis in my brain. It was very depressing, and they condemned me to whole brain radiation. And at that point, it became death, became very, very real and very, very close. It was they never gave me any date, but it was very clear from their reaction. I could tell the way they've written me off. From experience, they know I am now a goner. Whole brain radiation, it really scares me. If I don't accept the radiation, then for sure, sooner or later, I will become very badly symptomatic in the sense I will get seizures, I will get paralysis, God knows. Sooner or later. The question is how soon, how late. With whole brain radiation, I would not be able to work the way I do. I wouldn't feel as well as I do. So I began to think harder about cannabis. I got to have it. Dangerous or not?
Cannabis is not a dangerous drug. If people want to smoke it and like people drink beer, what the hell?
Ernest Drucker is professor of public health and social medicine at Columbia University and City University of New York.
The drug prohibition treaties that were made go back to 1911, and the United States was the leader in getting those in before it had even outlawed these drugs in its own country, because it wanted to establish itself as in moral leadership. And there were a group of ministers who were very what we call moral entrepreneurs, who used the drug issue, and it was very successful. Professionally and personally, I've known about cannabis for many years because it was the drug that everyone was using in the 60s. Things that used to be restricted to poor minorities or marginal groups like jazz musicians, artists, and so on, which had been the history of drugs. Suddenly, new populations were using drugs. What happened politically is that politicians noticed that they could appeal to the white middle class and the middle class fear and could win elections.
In 1970, Congress overhauled our federal drug laws and created the Controlled Substances Act. And the idea was that some drugs had a potential for abuse, and therefore they needed to be controlled. The amount of regulation was going to be based on how dangerous the drug was. Now, in that regulatory frame, there are 5 schedules. Schedule 1 is the most restrictive. That's for drugs with no medical use and the highest potential for abuse. And so heroin, for example, is a Schedule 1 drug. So the Nixon administration sends Congress a letter, and they said, we understand that marijuana doesn't really fit in Schedule 1, probably doesn't even fit in Schedule 2, because it lacks the high potential for abuse. But we want you to put it in Schedule 1 now for the time being. Then Congress should reschedule it, or the administration should reschedule it, but no one ever did. It was put there temporarily, and then it was just ignored and left there, where it remains to this day.
America's public enemy number 1 in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
The so-called drug war had started. The former deputy chief of the Los Angeles police, Stephen Downing, helped kick off the battle.
There's no metric that says this war on drugs is successful. The cartels, when I started, they didn't exist in America. This year, they control drug trafficking in 1,000 American cities. Marijuana comprises about 50% of the drug market. The impact, the health impact, let's say, people that die, well, of course, nobody in the history of the world has ever died from an overdose of marijuana. Several thousand people die a year from heroin overdoses and cocaine. I think today pharmaceutical drugs have passed up heroin and cocaine in deaths.
Oxycodones. I got 150. They can lead to stomach problems, to liver damage, and even to death. Much more dangerous than cannabis, which is not being used, it's not being developed. So what do I do? I'm going to ask my oncologist, Dr. David Sokol, about my situation.
we've spoken about it before, that, you know, this is probably not curable at this point. And
I really, really enjoy working, as opposed, to buying more time but not functioning.
the way you usually work or concentrate, there probably would be some drop off in your efficiency.
And that's permanent.
It can be, but most people are quite functional after the radiation.
But they can't remember anything.
Well, they're not walking around like, they don't know who their family is or...
No, no, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about my ability to do the work I'm doing, which is the greatest pleasure in my life.
Yeah. There might be some change in that.
How long does whole brain radiation delay the onset of symptomatic tumors? I mean, at the moment, I'm not symptomatic. It is calculated that I will probably be in a couple of months, maybe 3 months.
I'm not sure that I have the report. Let me see if I have the report.
They're probably 3 millimeters.
Right now, they're very small spots,
Yeah.
so they're like 6 of them or something. So in terms of where to go from here, let me just start by saying the radiation is probably more effective at buying time if the smaller the amount of
Yeah.
tumor that there is to treat.
But I have this plan for delaying for a month. Then I want to ask you, do you know this study? This is right bang relevant to me.
Cannabinoid, I see, okay. I don't know the study. And this is sort of in, animal models.
Yeah.
So a lot of things that seem to work in animal models
No,
don't work in the human people.
I know.
So, that's probably about all I can say.
Yeah, this is the National Cancer Institute, which I assume you accept as a reputable source.
Yeah.
I want to try it. You don't smoke it, you make it a highly concentrated oil
Okay,
and you eat it.
okay.
Doesn't sounds very nice. Probably isn't very nice.
Okay.
But and
I'm not sure where you get it.
I know that's my problem.
Okay.
How much am I risking by making this experiment myself? That you cannot tell. I can understand that.
It's
yeah.
really hard to
But I think it might be worth it. I mean, from my point of view, it might be worth just. I mean, I'm a goner. I have an awful lot to lose. Yeah. So.
Well, I wish I could say you really don't have to worry about that, but as you know,
I do.
you do.
I went up to my sister and we started looking for cannabis. There was that or whole brain radiation. So in August 2012, right after my alarming brain scan, I started to contact clinics in some of the states that allow medical marijuana. I was desperate to get Rick's oil or a pound of cannabis to make it, but only Oregon accepted out-of-state applications. My sister found a very promising address in Oregon for Portland Alternative Clinic, which is headed by a real doctor. But the clinic doesn't function like an ordinary clinic or a drugstore or pharmacist. You can't just go in and buy the stuff. You need to have somebody who will grow it for you. 2355. Yeah, hello, I got your number from the alternative clinic in Portland. I'm looking for a grower in Oregon, a person to grow cannabis for me that I need for medical purposes.
Not sure there's anything we can do.
They said would be able to get me in contact with a potential grower.
We don't provide growers like that. We don't really put people together as such.
And you can't give me any sort of contact number or anything?
We just don't have any. It's not something we do. So very good luck, ma'am.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye. They couldn't help, but I'm going to try again.
Thank you for calling Very with Chris. How can I help you?
Yeah, hello. I got your number from the Portland Alternative Clinic, and they told me that you were somebody who might possibly be able to give me a contact or a lead or something, or how to find a grower in Oregon. Are you still there? You really begin going into that panic state. That state of fear. I have this sense, the grave is just ahead. I don't want to go in there. There was yet another possibility. New Jersey had only just passed the law legalizing marijuana for medical use. In order to qualify, you have to have less than a year to live. But the card will be valid for 2 years, so They seem to think it's okay if I survive for another year. A moot point, anyway, since there's no pot available. My experiment with cannabis was going nowhere. And so I went ahead with the hospital plan and saw a radiologist, and we prepared a mask so that they can pin me down during the radiation. I bought a wig. I was completely ready, but by then something unexpected happened. We had got hold of some cannabis. So now I'm making this oil that Rick Simpson has the recipe for. It's quite a business. You have to sieve it, then you have to evaporate the stuff in a rice cooker until you get a very tiny amount of oil. Wait a second, I have to remove myself from this. I mean, the vapors from this, you can feel it. It's sort of slightly sickening. So the vapors are flammable. That's why we're doing it outside. I haven't really considered the possibility that the police might come. Of course, they could in principle. I mean, everything's possible. And maybe they could smell the vapors. But, well, you know, a respectable old lady like me, why should they burst into my house? Yeah, what if? You don't do that for the fun of it, that's for sure. You do it because you are determined to try anything you can to avoid imminent death. Of course, I instantly suffered a massive overdose. And I got to feel extremely bad for a long time. I took some, I had these pieces of bread with a bit of oil on it. I mean, I don't know how much it added up to, but it was very weird. It's not pleasurable at all. At all. So I'm making tablets, hash tablets of Rick's oil. I am eating this stuff. Too big. 1 tablet a day. It's disgusting. It's totally like tar. My hope is no growth of the metastases in my head. I'm risking jail in order to save my life. It's a pretty weird situation in which one has the sense that it's the government that's trying to kill you. It's very hard to make the same size tablet. If this were properly done by medical companies, it would be a lot better. I've been seriously overdosed. It's not nice, definitely not nice. And then it lasts forever. As they say on some website, you may feel as if you're going to die, but you won't.
People don't die from the direct effects of marijuana.
Dr. Aaron Lichtman is professor of pharmacology and toxicology at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia.
There's a range of side effects. There can be panic attacks, and in fact, that's responsible for a lot of the emergency room visits. Roughly about 10% or so in their lifetime will become dependent to marijuana. And there's a certain percentage of individuals, a very small percentage, that may show psychotic reactions if they smoke marijuana. Withdrawal effects include disturbed sleep, a distortion of time, disturbed dreams, disorganization of thought, but again, doesn't cause death.
Pharmacologists at VCU have studied the effects of cannabis for decades, often experimenting with mice.
This mouse has electrodes planted into its brain, and then we can study the effects of drugs on its behavior. There's been a lot of research looking at cannabis. Inside of cannabis, there's hundreds of compounds, and there are about upwards of 70 or more special compounds called cannabinoids. And this includes delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC for short, which gives people the psychoactive effects, the high.
The plant contains another interesting substance, cannabidiol, also known as CBD.
CBD does not produce the THC-like high in animals or humans. It can have anti-seizure effects. It's long been known to have anti-inflammatory effects. It decreases nausea and vomiting. And THC has a lot of medicinal effects too.
Already in 1975, VCU pharmacologists published a paper on the startling discovery that THC shrinks certain lung cancer tumors. But the experiment ended right there when the government cut the funding.
There was a war on drugs, and they had no idea really how it worked. When I got into this field in 1989, they hadn't discovered the cannabinoid receptor yet.
And that's a whole new chapter. It began in 1988 with the scientist now at Wake Forest, Alan Howlett.
I'm a PhD professor of physiology and pharmacology here at Wake Forest School of Medicine. I had initially just assumed that everybody knew how marijuana worked. But at the cell level, it wasn't very known at all. So my research was strictly at the level of the cells, and we were able to identify this protein at the receptor. This particular experiment is to try to understand what cells are making what kinds of proteins, whether CB2 receptors or CB1 receptors are present in the cells that we're working with.
Okay.
CB2 receptors are found mostly in the immune system, and CB1 receptors are found mostly in the brain. So these receptors are in many places in the brain, and they send the messages through a signaling pathway in neurons. The knowledge about the endocannabinoid system has been evolving over the last 20 years. And now that we've got much more information coming from the basic science, there are going to be new avenues for treating diseases. So I think this is just ripe for new pharmaceutical development.
I'm having a scan, a brain scan, an MRI, as they call them, to reveal the state of my brain, the metastases in my brain. And this will show whether it has any effect at all. And if it doesn't, then I am pretty much doomed. It's quite something. As I was in the scanner, I tried to play the film with a bad ending because I want, to imagine a bad outcome, so I get used to the idea. The way, you habituate, bad news, now get used to it. But every time I played the film with the bad ending, the film had this way of coming to an end, it wouldn't play, and I never really got to the end. Whereas when I played the happy end film, there was no problem. I'm expecting a call from my doctor. It's very, very scary. Hello? Hello? More of the same. And so we are back to where we started. I have the choice between whole brain radiation and death. Okay. So that was disappointing. The cannabis has not halted the growth, but there is a sliver of good news. My brain mets had grown very slowly, and Dr. Andrew Greenberg, my radio-oncologist, had expected the picture to look much worse.
You can see one here. There's a 6.9 millimeter nodule in the medial left occipital lobe. Here's another one here.
Yeah. Okay, but how many are there now altogether? 8?
5, 6, 7,
8.
9.
9?
9.
Oh my God. It looks bad.
What has changed is the scan, but not the person. In time, what I see in the MRI is going to catch up to the person whose MRI it is. With that said, at this point in time, there's no evidence of that, and in fact, to my eye, you are none the worse for wear.
You said they had grown very slowly. Could that be due to the cannabis?
Well, that probably speaks more to the genetics of one person's lung cancer versus somebody else's.
Yeah.
Could it have an effect? I mean, I can't sit here and say that it doesn't. It's a relatively benign approach, if you will. I don't want to say treatment. I'm not sure it's a treatment.
No, I'm not sure either.
So, I don't have a problem if one goes by the philosophy, first do no harm. If it's not harming you and it might be helping you.
These tumors grow very slowly, but whether they grow more slowly because of the cannabis, well, that's a big issue. I can't tell, he can't tell. But in the pathology lab at the Ohio State University Medical Center, a group of scientists working with Professor Ramesh Ganju are busy gathering more information.
So in our lab, we are trying to find out the anti-tumorigenic activity of cannabinoids against breast and lung cancer. We wanted to see if they could be developed to combat cancer. We incubate the cannabinoids with these cells and then look at their growth potential. How do they grow and how do they proliferate? And that way it gives an indication that if they inhibit the growth, that means it's killing the cells. And the next step is animal models. This is Catherine, who is doing most of the in vivo work, and she can explain you over here actually. Can you take out the mice and show her? Actually, these are the mammary tumors over here. We inject breast cancer cells into mammary glands, and then we can see over here the tumors are growing.
We watch the progression, we measure them regularly. We use external calibers to measure the tumor volume as it progresses. We're looking for the edges of the tumor. We basically do a cross-section. You find the longest length, and you measure that, and that is our longest length. Yes. Then you do the 90-degree angle, and you measure that, and you're able to calculate the volume of these tumors. Get it? So, very clear. And this is the cannabinoid-treated mice. So they started with the same tumor size. So the smaller tumor is sitting right there.
Dramatic.
It's a good indication of how the treatment is affecting it. And then we do the 90-degree. They're either shrinking or they're progressing slower compared to their vehicle. There's a big difference.
We have initially shown that the plant-derived cannabinoid, that's delta-9-THC, it has anti-tumorigenic activity against lung cancer.
Normal lung.
Metastasis to the lung.
All the yellow is
metastasis.
And this one is where
have been treated with these cannabinoids.
And now it's brown and healthier and very little yellow.
This was the result of plant-derived cannabinoids. I've also seen what synthetic cannabinoids can do. And now Dr. Ganju will show me a study that used endocannabinoids.
Okay, we're trying to see effect of endocannabinoids on lung cancer growth. We grow these cells in petri dishes, and these are the lung cancer cells. They form these colonies. We incubate these cells with endocannabinoids at two different concentrations. This is the lower concentration. You increase the concentration, all these cells disappear.
Yeah.
Here, the lower concentration, you do see some cells still growing. However, when you increase the concentration, most of the cells are gone, lung cancer as well as breast cancer.
I'm still taking it, and I'm feeling all right. I mean, physically, I'm feeling as well as ever. I decided to postpone whole brain radiation again. I prefer life as I know it for as long as possible. I have an errand run. I need more cannabis. Now I'm in Portland, in Oregon, to secure a legal supply of it.
This is organic. It's 100% organic, and there is a huge difference. And you can't spray it. You can only use water. Right at this moment, I have 2 other patients beside myself. And in a town like this, where we're quote-unquote weird, people are willing to go the alternative route to see if it works. And of course, it works. Come on, it's the oldest medicine in recorded history. My messy house. It's also a small place. I can show you what I get out of this tiny space.
Can I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which one do we recommend for lung cancer?
Lung cancer. You want something that's going to you're not going to have to smoke very much of.
No, I don't want to. Should it not be, it should be Rick's oil. Do you know Rick's oil?
Yes, I make it.
You make it?
I do use it with use Everclear and then put that in capsules.
That's just what I want.
Yes, and I have them. Let me show you. I have them. Right, hold on 1 second. I know exactly where I put them. Oh crap, where did I put them? Oh, I know where I put it. Never mind. Oh, yeah, well, I have them in a box. Yes, they're really good. I weigh these things from start to finish. They weigh each a half a gram.
Okay.
As many as you like. I made 250 of them.
Oh, wonderful. Mission accomplished. But I'm still a criminal for crossing state lines with marijuana in my suitcase. Cannabis remains in limbo, both legally and medically. Federal legalization may be too much to hope for, but I just want cannabis out of Schedule 1, where the Nixon administration put it.
We had a report from the Institute of Medicine about marijuana. They basically said Schedule 1 curtails research and development in cannabinoid drugs.
But even if you come up with a compound, not from marijuana itself, that produces any kind of marijuana-like effect, industry is not interested in it. And a lot of that is a carryover from the the banning of cannabis.
So it's treated more dangerously than nuclear materials, it seems that way.
I took a trip to Washington to visit President Nixon's point man on drugs and hoped he would make sense of it.
I am Robert DuPont, MD. I'm the president of the Institute for Behavior and Health. I was the first director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the second White House drug czar in the United States. Until 1971, that was almost totally law enforcement. And in 1971, President Richard Nixon changed American policy to what was called balanced policy that included prevention, treatment, and research. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, started in 1973. Yeah. And it is the focus of research on drugs of abuse. That was its mission. The largest part of all the research that had been done on cannabis has been funded by NIDA. Mm-hmm. We spend more money on prevention, more money on treatment than any other country in the world, by far. My focus was on heroin addiction. It wasn't anything to do with cannabis. But in the background was a public interest in, as it called then, marijuana or cannabis. But I dismissed that. I thought that was not a serious issue for somebody who was interested in drugs, and I fancied myself to be a serious person.
If cannabis is not a serious drug, why is it in Schedule 1?
Schedule 1 is a drug that has no approved medical use, and Schedule 2 is a highly abused drug that has an approved medical use. And so any drug that is widely abused is either in 1 or 2.
Sure.
And there is no now medical approved use for cannabis.
The government, on the one hand, funds research into medicinal properties of cannabis. On the other hand, it has put it on Schedule 1, which denies that it has any medical value. So there is a little bit of a disconnect.
There's no disconnect whatsoever, not the slightest disconnect. Schedule 1 drugs are researched all the time. Being in Schedule 1 is no barrier to research. That is a figment of the imagination of paranoid people. It's not true.
It's back to the question of why is it on Schedule 1 and not Schedule 2? This is what interests me.
But I just explained it to you. Do you now understand it?
No, I don't really understand it.
Oh, I'm going to say it again.
Yeah.
They're both, Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, are seriously abused drugs. You got that? Okay. Number 1 is for drugs that have no medically approved, but wait a minute, by the Food and Drug Administration. It's a very straightforward decision. It's not whether somebody thinks it's medicine. It's whether it's approved as a medicine. And if it is, and it's highly abused, it's in Schedule 2.
I know, sorry.
How hard is that for you to follow that?
No, I can follow that.
Thank you. But the next time you talk to somebody, say you don't have any doubt about it, you know exactly why it's in Schedule 1, because it was explained to you by me, right?
Government has cannabis on Schedule 1, but it also has a patent on the use of cannabis as a medicine.
What do you mean a patent?
There is a patent taken out in 2003. Yeah.
For what? I mean, I don't know what that would...
I'll show it to you. You're a doctor, you can understand it better than I can.
This says as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. I don't know what that is. I don't understand
But he
that.
talks about cannabis.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't know. In that application, I don't know. That's of somebody who knows about patents.
I got the patent right here. Here I am in Washington by the National Institutes of Health, NIH. More than 80 Nobel Prizes have gone to scientists doing research funded by this institute. And one of those scientists who worked right here and who got a Nobel Prize was Julius Axelrod, who specialized in neurotransmitters, in how cells talk to each other. And late in life, he participated in a study of cannabis that the government deemed to be so significant, so important, that it took out a patent on the findings. It says in its abstract that cannabinoids are found to have particular application as neuroprotectants in limiting neurological damage following ischemic insults such as stroke and trauma, or in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and HIV dementia. And it has more about how it's good for people who have undergone cancer chemotherapy or radiation and other sources of oxidative stress. We have here, which seems, an official recognition by the US government that cannabis has medical uses. In December 2012, after taking cannabis oil for 4 months, another scary test. I had a PET scan on my lung, ground zero of all my troubles. So now I'm waiting for the result of the PET scan I had last week, which will show me whether the cancer has spread to somewhere else in my body.
There's nothing on your PET scan?
Nothing.
Nothing that's recurrent that we can see within the chest cavity or anywhere else. Your PET scan's completely negative.
That's wonderful. It's funny, it's slightly relieved, but not as relieved as I thought I was going to be. But that's pretty good.
It's great news.
It saturates, and I will get to feel happier about it.
And it doesn't look at the brain.
I have 9 lesions in the brain now, and that I'm still asymptomatic.
You'll follow up with the radiation oncologist with your brain, which I'm unhappy about your brain mets, but I'm pretty happy about your PET scan.
There's a good chance that the cannabis has something to do with it, and so I'm not going to risk anything by stopping now. I have no doubt there is an anti-tumor potential in cannabis that should be explored. But there are still no human trials. So I continue to be my own human cannabis trial, and often it does feel like a trial. My brain doesn't fire. And my memory really is very bad, and it's very bad in a way which I think is beyond my normal old age badness. So is cannabis helping against cancer but hurting my mind? Luckily, I knew where to find an expert on aging brains and cannabis. Gary Wenk is professor of psychology and neuroscience at The Ohio State University.
My research is in rats.
Yeah.
And my research for the past 30 years has been focused on the aging brain. What makes it age? What I'm trying to do is figure out how do we reverse that, or how do we slow it down? All right, that would be the key. Most people would be happy just to slow it down a little bit. One of the biggest changes that wasn't really appreciated until probably 15 years ago was that as you get older, inflammation develops in the brain. And the principal properties of marijuana were sort of revealed over time as well. And it turns out that marijuana is a very effective anti-inflammatory. So we've been looking for drugs that are anti-inflammatories that get across the blood-brain barrier. And everything I've tested has worked very well in young brains, but nothing was ever effective in an old rat.
When we test old rats, they have a really bad memory. And the way we test that is in the Morris water maze, based on the decorations we put on the wall. He learns how to find the hidden platform in there. They get 6 training sessions every day for 4 days. All right, you gonna go swimming again, little guy? I know. A young rat like him should learn pretty quickly where the platform is, whereas an older rat would have no ability to do so. It'd be great if he found the platform for you. Oh, he's so close. So we have a camera on the ceiling that automatically tracks how he's swimming. Older rats that are really not smart, they'll just swim in circles until you take them out. You have to basically rescue them. But the young guys are very good at finding the platform. Ah, yes. Good job, buddy. So a normal young rat can find the platform. A normal old rat cannot find the platform. But when we give the older rats the synthetic cannabinoid, they're able then to find the platform.
Our wonderful surprise was that marijuana actually worked in an old brain. First time, first compound ever. So that just was so exciting because it gave us some hope that something would actually help people slow the aging process when they were already old.
We know that these rats have recovered something. They're more like the young rats than the old rats.
March 2013, I have an MRI. Every scan feels like a potential death sentence. But I'm still around, and I think I'm ahead of the curve. Last year, I was invited to a conference at Notre Dame. I thought, I can't really imagine myself being well still and able. So here I am a year later, and I've reached the April that I didn't think I was going to be able to reach. So I don't think there's any doubt that this cannabis has helped. But what is missing is clinical trials to show which are the best cannabinoids to use for this, which are the best strains. So in Santa Monica, California, I went to Greenbridge Medical Services to ask Dr. Alan Frankel about the problem. You have no idea what you get when you buy it, how to dose it. Dr. Frankel treats disease with plant cannabinoids, but applies scientific accuracy to dosing and strains.
The endocannabinoid system, the ECS, was discovered, I believe, in 90 or 91, so it's nothing new. The endocannabinoid system is the central controlling, modulating neuroendocrine system for the body. Without an endocannabinoid system, there's no life. That's how integrated this is with everything else.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you have to have cannabis externally to live. However, it makes no sense to save certainly the safest medicine ever for the people who are getting ready to die.
I'm waiting for a call from my radiology doctor. It's quite nerve-wracking. Very good. Thank you. Fine. Bye. Report shows they have all grown, but I got a small surprise. It mentions that there was generalized progression despite partial improvement at the medial right occipital lobe. Partial improvement. The doctor didn't say anything about that. So now I better take another look at all my brain scans before deciding about whole brain radiation. In 9 months, from November 2011 to August 2012, I had 8, possibly 9 metastases in my brain. In August, I started taking cannabis. In the next 8 months, I had 2 plus a partial improvement. It's pretty impressive. But is it impressive enough? Postponing radiation probably means faster death. Acceptance, and my life as a scholar is most likely over. I have always assumed that the moment I'm symptomatic, I accept whole brain radiation. I have these symptoms in my right foot, which suggest that I'm losing control of that foot and eventually of the whole leg. And because of this hash, my memory really is very bad. I work extremely slowly. I can't remember where I put anything, as if I'd already had whole brain radiation. So I might as well. It's actually 7 months since I was meant to have whole brain radiation. 7 months. It matters. It's wonderful weather. I got an honorary doctorate. and still well. I mean, you still cannot tell that anything is wrong with me. And it's been very nice. So far, the going has been pretty good. I think I have to say I've been lucky. Cheers. I'm going to the hospital for my whole brain radiation session. I finally took the hated step because it became clear that there was deterioration in my right leg. Well, I will lose my hair, and I don't believe I'll ever get it back. I don't believe I will get well enough for long enough. I have to say that not having had whole brain radiation in August when I was meant to have it, it has given me time to get used to the idea that, you know, okay, now I am, you know, on that slippery slope down where we can see the end. I completed 14 days of whole brain radiation, and the effects are terrible. I've lost my balance, I'm confused, my tongue is burning, and I've lost most of my hair. But the worst of it is that the radiation had only a small effect on my tumors. So I'll continue to take cannabis because it's amazing what cannabinoids can do. They affect just about every disease in the body. That has to reflect the underlying endocannabinoid system. So maybe the endocannabinoid system should be studied and unraveled, much in the same way as the genetic code has been done. It's a really exciting prospect. It's too late for me, but I am still thrilled by the idea of what they might come up with. It's so nice, so beautiful.
Sometimes it's just a matter of time. You've got left for goodbyes, and you don't want to cry, but it burns. Sometimes it just comes down to the heart of the matter. I want to feel better. Could a plant be the answer? Helping me with everything I need. I'm here. Heal me. Heal me. Heal me.
Always feel happy going out gardening, except when your plants are dying, then you feel deeply unhappy, but it's sort of the kind of emotions you need to suffer because of love.